What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 616. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me online all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, how are things?
Things are going great. You know, it's starting to turn towards fall, rain and cold and all that. But, you know, it's nice living in some place with seasons as opposed to California, which just doesn't have any, or Seattle, which has two, which is gloomy and sunny for a couple months.
Yep. That's pretty accurate. I don't know, man. I think California sounds just fine right about now. I'm looking out the window and there's just raindrops on it. I'm like, yeah, wouldn't hate it. This episode of the show, Blue's Clues. We're going to be talking about the other blue decks in Midnight Hunt, and we're going to go through the three that we haven't covered yet. We've also got a couple of, I don't know, potentially controversial topics to cover at the top as well, which I'm kind of interested to get your take on and to talk about. And of course, we're going to do a crack back and all our normal stuff as well on this episode. Before we do, let's mention our sponsors. First up, Channel Fireball. That's right. The marketplace is live. They've basically changed their business model. If you go over to Channel Fireball, you will now, like if you search for singles, you will be shown the singles in front of you like before, but they're from all different shops. You know, think local game stores, smaller companies, whatever. And you can pick the one that you want, you know, that meets your price and grading and all that kind of stuff. And it opens up the doors, you know, to have a really, I mean, effectively a huge selection of singles in one place where you can trust, you know, you can trust Channel Fireball. And when you go there now, I mean, boy, the selection is just completely insane because, you know, you're getting options from a whole bunch of different stores at once. A true marketplace experience there, and Marketplace Madness is now underway. This is just a way to kind of celebrate and kick off the big changes over at CFB. And when you buy singles and stuff like that on the marketplace, well, you get entered into drawings, basically. And there's a bunch of cool stuff that they're giving away. I think there's a Black Lotus in there, Luis.
Black Lotus, first edition Charizard, first edition box of like Welcome to Wrath and Flesh and Blood. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff, which neither of us are eligible to win. So
no, is everybody going crazy over there? Is it super busy right now?
Oh man, I mean, part of the reason we don't have a live show this week actually is because Jeff, our intrepid producer, got pulled off last minute to just help with the marketplace launch. It's kind of all useful hands on deck, which is why I'm free.
Which is why you're free and he's working. So yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes for the Marketplace Madness info if you want to check that out. But in the meantime, head on over to Channel Fireball and check out the new way to buy singles over there. And if you do end up picking up anything over at CFB, if you'd use the affiliate code LR at checkout, it does help out the show. It lets them know that we sent you over. The show is also brought to you by FTX. That's the place to go really for any of your crypto or NFT or digital asset needs. They're also, by the way, a marketplace, right? They're not actually, you know, a coin per se. They are a place where you can go to buy, sell, hold, whatever you want to do with these different digital currencies. And, you know, Luis and I see a lot of potential in this technology. It's still relatively in its infancy. You know, Bitcoin is kind of the most well known, but there are a number of other coins available. And if you go to ftx.us for US customers and ftx.com for international, you can see the ones that they have available, and you can invest in them. You can speculate. You can try it out. You can also put your money behind the coins that you think align with your goals the most. Each time somebody makes one of these cryptocurrencies, it has different strengths and weaknesses that they always have to juggle. And, you know, well, I think a lot of people think that one of these is going to end up being kind of the big winner. And, you know, not necessarily it's going to be Bitcoin. So, you know, that's a way that you can do that. You can research this stuff at FTX as well. It's a really interesting space that has, again, I think a lot of potential going forward. I think that these things, in one form or another, are going to be a part of our life, going forward. Little too deep of a topic to get into for our Magic podcast, to get into all the intricacies of that, but there's a lot of interesting information out there about them if you'd like to find it. I want to remind you that neither Luis nor I are investment professionals, and if you want to invest, you should definitely seek the help of an investment professional. These type of markets can be very volatile, and you really want to be well educated and know what you're doing before you jump in. So make sure that you educate yourself before doing anything like that. And again, that's ftx.us and ftx.com for outside of the US. The show is also, of course, brought to you by you via the Patreon. It's patreon.com/limited resource. We want to say thank you to everybody who's with us over on the Patreon. It really is the backbone of the show. It's been great, being able to take on an additional sponsor here. But, at the end of the day, we really look to our listeners to support us, and we really appreciate each and every one of you who do so. And, one of the things that you get as a patron is you get to submit questions for the Patreon question of the week. Now, I'm going to bend the rules a little bit this time, and we're going to take one from a friend of ours, actually, who listens to the show and sometimes gives us constructive feedback, shall we say, on Twitter. This is from Andrew Cuneo, longtime professional Magic player, who said, listen to the latest limited resources. Was really dissatisfied with the LSV answer about the arena ladder. You glossed over its many deficiencies and also didn't mention that it greatly dampens the ability of a draft format to self-correct. So I thought, you know what, Luis, if he's going to come after you on Twitter, we'll give you a chance to punch back. What do you say to that?
So I tried not to be too critical in the sense that there's a lot of negativity in general on social media, on whatever. It's really easy to tear things down as opposed to build them up. That being said, I've gotten more critical over the years, I think, of Wizards in general. And this particular topic, the arena ladder, I don't feel super strongly about it, but I'll admit Andrew's not wrong that the arena ladder has plenty of kind of deficiencies, as he says. Part of it is the kind of the ladder system itself. It's the sort of thing where, at least for me, I find it pretty demotivating, or just maybe not demotivating, but just not motivating to just play ladder and not really feel like you're really accomplishing much one way or another.
Other than just that number on the screen. Yeah,
which, look, it was cool getting to number 1 mythic or whatever, but most of the time that's not going to be kind of in the ballpark. I'll play constructed, right? I played some standard last week because I wanted to figure out what was going on. I played for a while. I was in gold, and then I continued to be in gold as I played 7 matches or whatever, and won some and lost some. And it didn't feel like there was any stakes. It didn't really feel like anything was happening. Limited's a little different because you pay to enter the drafts, so their stakes are kind of built in. But it's still the sort of thing where you draft. First of all, you draft in pods comprised of not people near you on the ladder. You just draft with the 7 other people who join, right?
Okay.
And then you play against people in your similar rank. So to that degree, yes, the ladder is not quite as self-correcting because you're not necessarily going to see the same. You're drafting in a different pool than what you're playing, and that can lead, if there's, let's say, a good draft strategy, like blue black, right? For example, in the first week was really underdrafted. That's something I identified on day 1.
Mm-hmm.
You could have, even if all the good drafters knew about blue black, there was still, and let's say it wasn't obvious to the general public.
Mm-hmm.
You could end up in a spot where you can get a good blue black deck every draft, and then you just play against a bunch of people in your rank who also have good blue black decks, and it's just draft's not really self-correcting. I don't have a reason to stop drafting blue black in that sense. I'm not seeing less of it despite playing against it a lot. So that can kind of
but it would direction. Be if, and I'm not saying that this is logistically possible, but it would be if, let's say you were high mythic, top 100 mythic. If when you joined a draft queue, you drafted against other top 100 mythic players, you feel that then that would self-correct.
That would help, yes, because you would play more frequently against people who kind of on the same page. Or you draft.
You mean draft against them, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's stuff there's a bug right now. I assume it's a bug where you just draw a lot of matches. I don't know if this has happened to you, but you'll join the queue and then it'll just be a draw. You lose rank when that happens if you're high rank.
Oh no, do you
it's
really?
Just complete nonsense.
I didn't know that.
It's hard to take it's hard to take the ladder seriously when stuff like that's happening, right?
Right.
And then and this actually kind of leads into our second topic, our second controversial topic here of people who draft a deck, decide it's not good enough, draft again.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of thing that I saw people talking about on Twitter as well.
Yeah, same. It was actually MTG Nerd Girl. She's a streamer. She drafts constantly. She's been a hardcore limited player since I've known her at the GP level.
Yeah.
And she says ranked draft formats should take losses for resigning. People should not be able to throw away decks until they open bombs. This is a flaw in the system that is left because it generates a lot of money. Drafting is expensive. Let's not make it play to win too. And that's, just to recap, what she's saying is I pay my 1,500 gems. I draft a deck and it sucks. And I just go, resign. I don't lose any rank, right? She's saying that should count as like losses for me. It doesn't. Right. So if I'm mythic number 27, I just stay that way. And then, hey, I got enough gems. I just join another draft. And then this time it's like, oh, wow, I opened some sick stuff. Blue black was open. Now I'm actually going to play. That's what she's saying. And, my first inclination was, well, I wonder how big of a problem this is, right? Like, is this widespread? Seth Manfield, one of the best players in the world, he replied and said, this happens a lot. You don't know about it if you aren't doing it, but there's a large group of players that only will play games with good decks, which I was kind of surprised by for a couple of reasons. One, just if that's true, I was unaware of it, but also like, I don't know where Seth is getting this data, right? Like there's a large group, like how large, right? Like what do we, this is his feeling on it. I would say, I mean, I don't know.
Look,
I mean,
Seth's one of he is one of the greatest Magic players in the world. He's not one of the greatest logicians in the world. Like this, this is based on him saying, I know some people who do this, and right. I extrapolated that based on how many people I know, and then how many people I know who do this. I'm going to go with the data this time, and Sirkovitz weighed in on this on one of the Twitter threads and said, from 17 lands data, there are very few drafts being resigned, and I would expect 17 land data actually overrepresent people who resign drafts, because we're talking competitive invested players.
Yes.
These are the people who care about their rank and probably have the gems that it's not a big deal. I don't see a casual drafter doing this, right?
No, especially not in our position, right? Like we have a view on the limited landscape where we get a lot of tweets and emails and stuff from, the real, like the core audience for limited, people that are excited about limited. But many of our listener base get to draft like maybe once a week, right? It's like, okay, I got my arena draft for the week. Let's do like, they can only set aside that much time or money. It's not a priority for them, but they really enjoy it, that type of thing. Of course, there's people like us who just, draft. And we have listeners that do that as well. But, there's a large chunk of people that draft 1 or 2 times a week and call it good because of how expensive it can be. It can add up really quickly, especially if you're not winning that much, right? When you're still learning and getting better. I don't think those people are doing that ever.
No. And I don't think people who, are looking at their gem counts, or people who are, like you said, drafting once or twice a week or doing it a little more casually, or people who don't aspire to like get to the very highest rank or whatever are doing this. The people who do care about those things are more likely to be using a program like 17 Lands, right?
Yep.
Because it definitely helps you. 17 Lands is great, in tracking your own drafts and getting a sense of what's going on. So if Sirkovitz is saying of 17 Lands users, this rarely happens, I would be hard pressed to accept the argument that of non-17 Lands users, it's drastically higher.
Mm-hmm.
So from that perspective, I don't think it's a big deal. Look, I don't disagree with the part where the original part where MTG Nerd Girl says it would be better if these things counted as losses. I think that probably would. Like you draft from a player perspective, not from a wizard's perspective. We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Go ahead.
But so from a player perspective, if you draft a bad deck, I think it is more fair for determining mythic ranks that you have to play out all those decks or just scoop and take the losses. And from the perspective of when I join the queue, I'm playing against slightly better decks on average because there's some people who do this. Mm-hmm. Again, I think at the end of the day, it's kind of a moot point, like a non-issue because of how few people do it. I just have a hard time thinking this is the thing that matters, but whatever. You get to complain about whatever you want. That's fine. Mm-hmm. From a wizard's perspective, this thing is awesome. There's people dropping and then giving us more money.
And so they basically, what that means is that every time you enter a draft, it costs 1,500 gems. And if you drop and do it again, then you eliminate the time in between where you were playing your matches and not generating income for them. So it's just your frequency goes up a lot.
And you're not giving other people wins.
Right.
It's even better.
Yeah.
You're not even taking the wins, because normally when two players play, gems are generated win or loss, right? Like
oh my God, I didn't think about
win.
that.
Yeah. So
well, here's a question though. Would you turn it off if you were Wizards? I mean, you've worked on the other side of multiple digital card games now.
I wouldn't turn it off for two reasons. The first is that it just doesn't matter that much. The people who want to do this, like, you let them do it, I think they'll be slightly happier. Everyone else, it's basically invisible. Mm-hmm. And then second, like, it is just better for you. I don't think it's exploitative. Like, the loser in this situation is the person who plays against the better deck after someone dropped and redrafted.
Yes.
My guess is you play against that once per season or something.
Yeah.
Maybe less. I don't know.
Yeah. What if it became a thing that people did more? Or, like, I think a good use case for this is, you were saying earlier with the Cuneo question that there wasn't really much on the line when it came to ranked. It was, I mean, like, you know, there's two things that you get out of getting a high rank. One is a Twitter picture that says I'm #1 mythic, right? It was the first thing you did when you hit mythic. Yeah, I mean, it's awesome.
Like I said, it's in the terms of service.
Yes, I agree. I agree. It's just a must, right? And that's cool. I think that's a fun. I think that's really the most, like, kind of wholesome part of it. And then, you know, these things do qualify for the qualifier weekend things when those are going. So there's something there, but they also qualify a lot of people. It's not like 100. It's, you know, 1,200 or whatever it is, 1,500. So that part, you know, that's kind of what's at stake right now. But I'll tell you, if the stakes even went up a little bit more, you know, let's just say there was something along the lines of an arena open, but instead of being open, it was an arena closed, right? Where, like, the mythic players can play it, and it's just a cash prize, not a qualifier for a qualifier, but, like, you know, you do really well in arena open, you get $2,000. Let's say it's similar structure, but it's $5,000 for the winner, and the prizes, you know, scale down. That's something that people would really, really want to play in, right? I mean, that would be a hot thing to play in. Now, are we looking at it and going, maybe if you resign, you should pick up the 3 losses worth of, you know?
So let me clarify my answer. If I was Wizards, I would know how often this would happen. If it was happening a lot, at this point, I would start to want to do something about it.
Okay.
Because I think if it happens too often, it will start to have a negative effect. If it doesn't happen very often, if 1 out of 1,000 drafts gets resigned early, or 1 out of 500 or something, I'm just not. It's going to be hard for me to really want to expend much effort when there's so many things they could fix in their program instead. Yeah,
you know, I think the biggest damage that this does right now is actually to the. It's funny. It's to the players who are the victims of it, if you will. Again, the players who have to play against the people who have the souped up decks because they're using their wallet basically to self-select. But it's actually the fact that there's a large group of players that will think that that's happening even when it's not, because their opponent just has a really good deck. And then they get a lot more frustrated and a lot more like, this is BS. You know, there's no way that somebody could have that deck type of thing when there is, you know, it's the classic, you know, humans are really bad at randomization. They're really bad at big numbers. We just have a very difficult time. I mean, we've listened for years and years and years. People talk about the shuffler, right? And, you know, somehow making the very human correlation to, I didn't get an ideal mix of lands and spells, therefore the shuffler's broken, right? Which is like this bizarre connection that it's like, why would you think it was broken? Because it didn't give you what you happen to want, right? Like, randomness doesn't work like that. So, you know, if anything, if you got a perfect mix of lands and spells every time, then the shuffler might be broken, but nobody ever says it then, right? So we're really terrible at this stuff. And emotionally, it can feel like, hey, this program has it out for me, right? I mulliganed 5 times in a row. I kept a 2-lander. I didn't draw a 3rd land. You go on your hypergeometric calculus. I'm 87% and I didn't hit it. What is going on? Right. And you start to look for reasons why you're losing other than just it was the random outcome of a random game. And you will come to conclusions like the shuffler's broken on Arena or Magic Online. And now you've got this excuse of like, well, I faced against a player that had 4 bombs and whatever. And it's like, obviously they were, you know, draft selecting on me. And that part is the part that that to me undermines consumer confidence a little bit and kind of exploits a human weakness. And I don't like that part very much.
Yeah. I guess to sum it up, I think it would be better if this wasn't a thing you could do. I just don't think this happens at a degree that I would want to to really make a big deal out of.
I don't think so either. I wonder if people would stop it if Wizard says, okay, you got 3. Because some people I don't think it's about rank. They just want to have great decks and smash people with them. Okay, let's do a Crack-a-Pack, Luis, before we get into the archetypes we're going to cover today.
I got a Crack-a-Pack, actually, courtesy of the LRcast subreddit. This is a pack that got posted there. So,
very nice.
We have Tireless Hauler, the 5-mana 4/5 Vigilance, Daybound Wolf. Pretty clear this isn't a first pick. Mm-hmm. Stuffed Bear, a card which has one of the lowest win rates.
Man, my chat tries to bully me into taking and playing Stuffed Bear every time I stream. I don't know why they're so obsessed with that card.
Well, the card's actually masterful because people love it and it's really bad. It's good to have some cards I think that are just crowd favorites, but we're not going to take it.
Yeah.
Soulgride Griff. Mm-hmm. The 5-mana 3/4 flying. When it enters the battlefield, exile a card from a graveyard. Playable card, not like an exciting card, but definitely a fine curve topper. All right, here we go. Siege Zombie, 2-mana 2/2 that lets you tap 3 creatures to nug your opponent for 1. So certainly the pick so far.
Definitely.
Siege Zombie is a pretty nice one. I'm not generally too unhappy if I start with a Siege Zombie. It's below average for a literal first pick, but at this point, when you get a third pick Siege Zombie, it is just not bad.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Secrets of the Key. So this is the 1-mana instant that makes a clue and it flashes back to make 2 clues. Not a great card.
It's a bad card.
Okay, it's bad. It has some uses.
Okay.
If you put it in your blue-red spells deck, sometimes it can get you up to the spell count you want, and you have a lot of time. And then in the blue-green self-mill deck, I've found it to be playable in some instances.
Okay.
Not great or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, here we go. Organ Hoarder, the 4-mana 3/2 that lets you, look at your top 3 cards, take the best one, put it in your hand,
Best common.
and the rest in the graveyard. Yeah, so
Mythic common,
just unbelievable card. So currently we're slamming Organ Hoarder here.
Yes.
So next up we have Moonrager Slash, the lightning bolt that costs 1 during night. Not a card which I'm thrilled to.
It's weird
to take at this point.
I mean, day 1 I would have taken this first, and it's like so far down the list now. Like I would take Siege Zombie over it. Like not just because red's in the bottom tier colors, but it just isn't that good in the format. I maybe it's because of Flashback or Disturb or something. Crazy? But what's that?
Neonate's Rush, the 3-mana deal 1 to a creature to a player draw a card, costs 2 if you have a vampire. Mm-hmm. Higher win rate than Moonrager Slash.
Yeah, I mean that says it all, doesn't it?
It's something.
That's terrible. Wow. Yeah.
Howl of the Hunt is next. So this is the Flash +2/+2 aura. Not really going to consider that. Hobbling Zombie, the 3-mana 2/2 Death Touch that dies into a zombie. Mm-hmm. Solid card.
Yeah.
It's good. It's worse than both Organ Hoarder and Siege Zombie, I believe, but definitely a good card. Eccentric Farmer, the green Organ Hoarder. The 3-mana 2/3 mills you for 3, and then you get a land back. I like the card a good amount.
I do
think
too.
Eccentric Farmer is the best green common. I think it is quite strong. We're going to talk about it today when we talk about blue-green.
I do find the comparisons to Organ Hoarder offensive, though. But
some people say it's better.
I know, they're wrong.
I agree. Winterthorn Blessings. This is the blue-green gold card. Sorcery, put a +1/+1 counter on one of your creatures, tap one of theirs, does non-tap, and flashback 1 blue-green. Really impressed with this card.
Very powerful.
It does exactly what blue-green wants. It's playable from the graveyard. It offers some relevant interaction. You can often kill them if you cast this in the same turn. Both halves. It's pretty sick. Not better than Organ Hoarder. I mean, it's not. First of all, it's not better than Organ Hoarder. Second, it's a gold card.
Mm-hmm.
Firmament Sage, the 3 blue, when it switches from night to day, draw a card creature at 2/3. Not a card I've been impressed with. I just don't think. We've said this a lot of times. This is part of why Secrets of the Key is not that good, or Mysterious Tome, or Vivisection. This format has tons of card draw that you don't have to play cards that don't do much else. And Firmament Sage is a little bit slow, a little bit overcosted for the body. Compare it to Organ Hoarder again, or even Eccentric Farmer. Eccentric Farmer also draws a card at cheaper cost and mills you some cards.
Yeah, it is really sad when you look at that compared to Organ Hoarder, and they have the exact same cost, and somehow one's an uncommon and just way worse. It's just like, wow.
So we're still on Organ Hoarder here. Clear Shot's the next uncommon. This is the 2 green instant. Give a creature +1/+1, and then it deals its damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. I think that Organ Hoarder is a pretty good amount better than Clear Shot, though.
It is. Yeah, Clear Shot ultimately is a removal spell. It is a good one. It is legitimately a good card. It can lead to some nasty blowouts if the blocks line up correctly as well. But ultimately, like, removal spells are replaceable and Organ Hoarder isn't.
Yeah. All right, and we have a mythic rare here, Arlen the Pack's Hope. This is the
wow
2 red-green planeswalker that he has Daybound. You can +1 it to cast your creature's flash and at +1/+1 counters, and then -3 makes 2 wolves. And then the flip side adds mana or turns itself into a 5/5. So, I mean, you're slamming Arlen here, I imagine.
Well, it's interesting because green-red is the worst color pair, and this puts me firmly in the worst color pair. I have yet to play with Arlen the Pack's Hope. So yeah, I actually would. I actually would take it here. It looks very, very strong to me, but I haven't played with or against it. So I don't actually know. Actually, I think I have played against it, but I don't know how great it actually plays. Do you have experience with the card?
So the reason this is funny is the person who posted this pack is like, am I supposed to take Organ Hoarder, pick one, pack one over Arlen? I would take Organ Hoarder.
Okay.
I actually drafted a couple days ago a red-green deck that had Arlen and Ren and 7 and a decent spread of red and green commons and uncommons and whatnot, and went 2 and 3. And
good God,
it just feels like you're playing Core Set. Like you're playing a bunch of 3 to 5 mana creatures that have no ETBs and no abilities, and sometimes they turn a little bigger, and your opponent's casting Organ Hoarders.
You're playing Core Set Limited, and your opponent's playing Modern.
Yeah,
so, come on.
Hand over my heart, I believe that if you were presented with Arlen versus Organ Hoarder, pick one, pack one, you should take Organ Hoarder. Okay. And that's what I would do.
Okay.
So, great pack. I've been enjoying the LRCast subreddit, so I try to weigh in when I see stuff that's interesting, and this was a good pack to talk about for the Cracker Pack.
All right, very nice snipe there. I like that. Okay, so we're taking Organ Hoarder, and I would take Arlen if I was sitting in the seat, just because I haven't played with it. But after hearing that from Luis, I would lean back over. Okay, Luis, we talked about blue-black in depth on the last episode, but the blue, you can make an argument about blue or black being the best color. I think black's the best color, but whatever, it's close. We're going to talk about the other blue decks available in the format. So that's blue-red, blue-green, and blue-white, which we haven't covered yet. But if you end up first picking an Organ Hoarder, you might want to know the other directions that you can go. Organ Hoarder will go into any blue deck, but there's a lot of cards that it isn't true with. So let's start with the blue-red Spells Matter deck, which kind of leans on flashback, right? Anytime a spell like an instant or sorcery has flashback, that means that you can by default cast it twice. And that means that anything that triggers off of things getting cast, you have a lot more access to triggering those things multiple times in a turn or multiple times over the course of a game. So the question becomes, well, what are my payoffs and how good can that be? How would you categorize the deck on the kind of aggression versus control scale?
So I actually think that there's kind of like 2 blue-red paths you can take. Mm-hmm. Both have a lot of overlap in the sense that like they want a lot of the same cards, they have a lot of the same spells, but there's the aggressive version that's like got Festival Crashers, Delver of Secrets, really loves having like Thermal Alchemist, and can really put a lot of pressure on the opponent. The Spell Rune Painter, the uncommon 2/3 that flips into a 3/4 that gets +2/+2 for every spell you play. Mm-hmm. And there's the more controlling version, which basically has a few less threats, and then we'll have something like Mysterious Tome or more Secrets of the Keys, and something like Burn Down the House as a reason maybe to end up on the slightly more controlling version, having a Wrath plus like 2 ways to get it back. Is a good way to end up controlling a game. Ardent Elementalist with powerful spells is obviously cool. In my experience, the aggressive version is better. Like, okay. I have one more with my aggressive decks, and by the way, Delver's great in these decks. It's actually legit fantastic.
It is.
And even Festival Crasher, what you'll end up doing is you'll play a creature or 2, and then you can start using your removal and hitting them for 5, or you get to leave up a counter spell and then whack them when they when you counter their spell, as opposed to the controlling version, which there's just so much card advantage. We just talked about it, right? And just because we're saying, hey, cards like Vivisection or Mysterious Tome or whatever are a little bit lower on our pick orders. That doesn't mean people aren't playing these cards. And if your control deck is playing against someone who has 5 extra ways to draw cards, there's nothing saying that you're just going to win because you killed all their stuff. And I've had these games where I'm like, kill your thing, counter your thing, Revenge of the Drowned, which, by the way, Revenge is much less good when you're not attacking them because you just recast their 5-drop. And then they draw 2 extra cards from some effect, or they have some disturbed creatures, and you end up not ahead. Like, the Nightmare scenario you play against, your opening hand is Immolation and Moonrager Slash, flip the switch, and then they go Turn on Lunarch Veteran, turn to Bait Hook Angler. And you're just like,
oh no. So, their life total's high, their creatures all come back. Yeah.
So basically, you can draft this in both directions. I have had more success leaning aggressive. It's not like you're changing the whole deck, but if your last 5 cards are aggressive instead of controlling, that can really change the tenor of the deck.
So with that in mind, how do you get into this deck? Usually what ends up happening is you take good blue cards early because, maybe you're leaning blue-black, or you just pick up an Organ Hoarder and a couple other blue stuff. And then, it's 3rd, 4th pick and the pack's a little dry. There's nothing good in blue. And you're like, well, I'll take a Moonrager Slash here, I guess. And then the next pack comes and it's like, oh, wow, there's some decent payoff in there that maybe shouldn't be, think Thermo Alchemist or something like that. You're like, oh, all right, I'll take a Thermo Alchemist. And now you've got Thermo Alchemist, 2 or 3 blue cards and a Moonrager Slash. And now what you can do is start to prioritize the spells matter payoffs. Interestingly, a lot of times they will wheel, like you can get those either on the wheel or just later in the pack, where you can still say, I'll take another Moonrager Slash, another Organ Hoarder, another just good card in this color pair. And then you can pick up the key commons and uncommons and even rares a bit later than you normally would. Now, what are those? Well,
I wanted to say one thing about how to get into the deck. Another common way to get into the deck I've found is literally opening Burn Down the House or Light Up the Night or some powerful red spell specifically, though any red card also can do it, and ending up where you're like, all right, well, what's the best way to utilize Burn Down the House or Light Up the Night? Well, it's to pair it with the blue cards, because blue, I actually am starting to think blue actually is the best color, but again, blue and black, the 2 best colors. And when you end up wanting to really maximize these, plus if I first pick a red card, I don't want to be red-green. I'm going to go like jump through hoops.
I don't want to be red-white either.
Yeah. I found red-black to be all right. That's a topic for another show. But I don't want to be red-green or red-white. So if I first pick a red card, it's like, I'm probably going to be red-blue. Yeah.
So I definitely have gone down that road as well, where you've got it narrowed down to those 2 archetypes and you end up in this one. Some of the key commons, Organ Hoarder is going to be a key common kind of no matter what. Moonrager Slash Startle is actually a card that you'll play like kind of as many as you can get. Anything that cantrips and does anything to the board generally goes up for decks like this. Ardent Elementalist is one of the key commons. That's a 3 and a red 2/1 when it ETBs you can get back an instant or sorcery. Look, not all your cards have flashback, and this is the type of card that can really do a good job with that. Luis mentioned Festival Crasher. It's really very annoying. It can get in for a heck of a lot of damage. It also has stats that tend to line up well with the early stuff from your opponent. A lot of times they have a 2/3 or a 2/2 or a 1/2, and you can just attack into it. There's enough stuff in your hand that they're just like, fine, I'll take it. And you either get to chip in for the free 1 or you get in for the 3 or the 5 or whatever. That happens all the time. Festival Crasher, like the funny part about it is that Festival Crasher generally is not a very good creature, so people are a little bit reluctant to use removal on it. But I'll tell you, if you play against this deck and they go Festival Crasher, just defenestrate it. Like their whole hand looks so much worse if they don't have anything on the board, particularly if they're the aggressive version like Luis described. You don't be afraid to use removal on these small 2-drops that you think, well, maybe I'll just block it or I'll trade for it. Just kill the damn thing. It's much better for you. Festival Crasher also leverages the fact that there's a lot of bounce spells in the format that simply remove the blocker from the equation temporarily, but then all of a sudden Festival Crasher's, 3, 5, 7 and hitting you, and you're like, wow, like, is it too late for me now? And another little subtlety that happens on these are the zombie tokens can add up really quickly too. You can end up with 2, 3, 4 zombies sitting there. And when you've chipped in for a couple of big hits of 6 or 7 or whatever with a couple of your creatures, the attack all with zombies plan starts to look a lot more realistic. And again, that goes to Luis's preference for the aggressive version, which matches mine as well. Neonate's Rush. Similar to what we said, it's not as common that you'll get to cast it for its reduced cost. But again, any cantrips that can affect the board at all are kind of where you want to be, and Rush does that as well.
I also want to note that I have fairly often found in blue-red that I have no way to use the zombies besides literally attacking.
Yep.
At that point, you should actually just attack with your zombies when the coast is clear.
You just translate them to damage once you can do it.
You just don't have anything else you're doing with them.
Yeah, so it's true. That's a great point. Because normally we sit on them.
Yeah, normally there's tons of ways to use them in blue-black, and even in blue-white, it can come up with some ways. But like this deck is the one that's highest on the list of, I have literally no way to use these zombies for anything. So if they have no blockers and I got a zombie, I'm just going to attack them.
Definitely. Some of the uncommon and rare payoffs, these are also the type of cards that, again, you pick an Organ Hoarder, you pick a whatever, a slash, and then you see one of these that also might push you down this road. Luis mentioned Delver of Secrets, legitimately great in these decks. It's probably the scariest thing to see on turn 1. If they go Island Delver and then play a mountain, you're just like, crap. One funny interaction that did happen to me is my opponent played Delver, and then they put a stop on their upkeep, and they played Consider. And I'm like, oh, it doesn't do what you want. Because all the other cantrips are like, I'll put this back, and this one's just like, you can dump it in your yard. So at any rate, but a Flip Delver on the first turn, I don't know what the percentage gain is, but it is huge. Like, it is so difficult to deal with if you don't have the answer right away, and you'll take 9 damage off it a lot of times. Lear, Disciple of the Drowned, is a insanely great payoff for this type of deck. Ominous Roost, I have seen people use this well in this archetype. Where are you at on it?
I'm pretty low on Ominous Roost. I haven't found it particularly good in this deck. I played it once in blue-green, and it was pretty good. But for the most part, I don't think Ominous Roost is where you want to be. Geist
Flame Reservoir, that card does really good work in this deck. I mean, generally, you don't want cards like this, but this one really does good.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Geist Flame Reservoir.
Yeah, same.
In this deck and red-black.
And in red-black, right. By the way, that's the 2 in a red artifact. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you put a counter on it, and you can pay 1 in a red, tap it to remove any number of those counters to do that much damage to any target. Or you can pay 1 in a red, tap it, and exile the top card of your library, and you can just play that card. And that doesn't care about charge counters, so that's just, a source of card advantage once the game goes a little later. Seize the Storm. That's the one that makes the big token. Smoldering Egg. People will snipe this one from you because it's just kind of an excellent card in general, but it is absurd in this deck. I mean, really stupid. Card's insane. Spell Rune Painter is the one that Luis mentioned that gets pumped up, and when it flips, it gets even more pumped up. Thermo Alchemist is awesome in this deck. It really is one of the best uncommons. Arcane Infusion. What was that again? I wrote that down, but
that's the blue-red impulse for a spells only.
Oh yeah, so that's a card you definitely want, right?
Yeah, I haven't actually liked it very much. I feel like for the most part it is just too high a cost of missing, and the payoff is a 1-for-1. Like, you're not really getting that much value out of it. So
it's a lot of triggers.
Yeah.
I think I'd run it. I mean, assuming that you're running the requisite number, which we'll talk about in a moment. Storm Skrillex, that's the 3 blue-red 2/4 flyer that makes your instants and sorceries cheaper. And whenever you cast one of them, it gets +2/+0. That card's a hammer. They have to kill it. It kills them really, really fast.
I don't like this one that much either. Like, you put it in your deck, but it's a 5-mana creature that like just eats a removal spell a lot of the time, and I just haven't been that impressed with how this one plays out. I
mean, I guess I view it a little more glasses. I just see it like it's a 5-mana creature that they absolutely have to kill. And I like cards like that. I mean, yeah, you can end up a little behind on mana with it because it does die to a bunch of stuff. And then there's Vadrik as well, which can do things in this deck. Let's talk about the card types. So I will often find myself running 16 lands and leaning even lower than that if possible with this because of the number of cantrips in the deck. Do you find yourself in that spot too?
Yeah, I almost always play 16 lands in this deck. I've even played 15 if I have enough considers.
And then another thing that is huge here is, normally you're going to play something like, 12 to 15 creatures or whatever. This is actually a much lower creature count. We have 6 to 10 here. Look, you still need them. They still are important. Many of the payoffs end up being creatures, but you do need to make room in your deck for the spells. And that's why your creature count ends up being lower. Simple.
Yeah. I feel like this deck's at its best when you have like 7 creatures in it.
Yeah, I think so too. Which is another reason why if you're playing against it, you should just kill their stupid creature like on sight. Don't get cute. Just kill the damn thing. That means the number of combat tricks that you want for this deck is 0. Yes, some of them can fit the makeup of the deck, right? The neonates, whatever it's called, the one in a red, +3/+1 trampler to your attacking guy, right? I mean, that can add up a huge amount of damage. The problem is that when you're running so few creatures, it's just too easy to get your combat tricks stranded in your hand, and it's not worth it to play them in that case. It also accentuates the fact that you're playing fewer creatures, therefore your opponent is more likely to be able to kill those creatures because their first 2 removal spells might just kill the creatures that you've drawn for this game so far, and so you don't want to play into that even further. So don't play combat tricks if you can help it. And then, you want to be up in the 10 spell range. I mean, more even if you have them.
You want like 15 spells if you can swing it.
Yeah.
This is why I said like the 7 creature deck is the best, because then you end up with 15 spells or 16 spells in your deck. Because Delver with like 12 spells is playable. Delver with like 15 spells is awesome.
Yes, it's actually like really, and if you can get multiples, it's insane. And then removal, combined in with the spells, you do want a lot as always. But even some of the more expensive ones come in. Like this to me is a great deck for the 5 mana red removal spell. It kills most anything. You can buy it back, and the incidental damage actually matters for this deck. There's a lot of pinging and extra hits, or maybe get in once with the 1/3, and then a few Thermo Alchemist things and a couple of damage off of that burn spell, and then it happens again when you rebuy it. And all of a sudden your opponent's staring at a very low life total, and you can finish them off. Also, don't be afraid of bounce spells if you're running the aggressive version, as I mentioned before.
Even the controlling version, bounce spells can play out well if you have enough value engines kind of going on.
And then cards that you should be valuing higher or lower for this archetype. I mean, obviously all of the spells matter, payoffs. I don't think there's any of them that I just straight up don't play. But make sure that you're aware of times when you may be able to wheel them or pick them up later, because you still should prioritize the really good blue and red cards / spells above the other stuff, and then get those a little bit later. That's really the strength of the deck. If you're going to succeed at this, it's because you're taking Organ Hoarders and Moonrager Slashes early, and you're getting the Festival Crashers and stuff late. That's the exchange that you're making to get ahead of decks like Blue Black, etc. One notable card that comes up is Immolation, which it doesn't fit in this archetype at all. Even though the effect would, like the ability to just like red effect, do 2 damage to a creature or whatever would be quite strong, but it just doesn't trigger anything. So I try to avoid it myself.
It's fine to play it. It's a totally playable card, but it's weird that you end up with a spell that doesn't actually do the spell thing.
I'm not sure I would have put Immolation in the set, that had a blue-red spells matter theme, even though most of them do. Before we leave blue-red spells, where do you have this deck kind of ranked, or is this one of the stronger archetypes? Is it weaker? Because I have it top half, but barely.
Yeah, I think that it's blue, white, and blue, black are better. I like blue green more as well, and white green. I've actually been drafting a decent amount of white green.
I also think that white black is a better, or did you say white black?
I haven't said white black because I'm not sure how much I like white black compared to blue red. I've drafted blue red more often actually. Mm-hmm. But I think that the deck is pretty good. It's one of those decks that like you don't need a reason really to go into blue white or blue black, like, because those decks are just like, if you draft those colors, they're reasonably open at all, you end up with a great version of the deck. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a good reason to go into blue red, I prefer not to go into blue red. So
it seems to have the highest variability Like, I can show you some like really insanely good blue-red decks, but I can also show you some that missed, right? Where like I had a good start and maybe a few of the payoffs didn't come there, color got cut. And if you don't get the balance right on these decks, it really stinks. This is one of the hidden reasons why the best archetypes in a format are the best archetypes in a format like blue-black. You don't have that problem. Like there's not key pieces to that deck that you just miss on and then you can't win or the deck really suffers. Like if I showed you an otherwise really good blue-black deck and I said, but I didn't get any siege zombies, you'd be like, that's fine. I can still win. Right. Even if I told you I didn't give any organ hoarders, you'd be like, oh, there's ways we can figure it out. And that's a really important card for it. There's just nothing that makes the house of cards tumble like that. But with blue-red, there is. If you're low on spells or you don't get the payoffs, it kind of stinks. You just don't do anything.
Yeah, and you can put together an extremely not functional collection of blue and red cards.
Yes.
You can't really with blue-black or really even blue-white. Like
right.
That's just not what ends up happening.
Okay, now you said that you've been liking blue-green in the kind of flashback ramp shell. Let's talk about that deck.
All right, so this is a kind of a throwback to classic Innistrad of self-mill, where you end up with a blue-green deck that's got a lot of self-mill cards and flashback cards and disturb cards. So that the additional element in this that's specific to this set is disturb. And I have been pretty happy drafting the deck. You end up getting a lot of card advantage, and you end up being able to actually clog up the board pretty effectively, where you're casting your organ hoarders and eccentric farmers to get your cards, and you're flashing back cards and disturbing cards, but you're not really falling behind on board.
Mm-hmm.
So the way to get into this deck is really like early organ hoarders and eccentric farmers. Like, not that you really need any excuse to draft organ hoarder, but
right.
Eccentric farmer is a lot better than I think most people give it credit for.
Mm-hmm.
It's 3 mana 2/3 that most of the time draws you a card, and in this deck it's by far the best. It's good in any green archetype, though really there's only 2 green decks I like, which is white green and blue green. So
yeah.
But it's still good in white green aggro. It's that good of a card. But in this deck, I mean, I've had eccentric farmers that draw me a land and flip 2 disturb cards, and it can just be incredible.
Or flashback. Yeah, that's insane. Yeah.
Yeah. And, it stocks your graveyard for other things like your Death Bonnet sprouts and what have you. Mm-hmm. Another way I get into this deck, and this is similar to the blue-red deck, you open a green bomb, like you open, Tovolar's Huntmaster or Briarbridge Tracker, and the directions you can go are green-blue and green-white. Green-black is the least drafted color pair for a reason. I just don't think the cards synergize particularly well. And green-red, I think, is the worst color pair. So I would basically try not to be those, but I don't mind first picking a green card, especially a good one. Mm-hmm. So that leaves green, blue, and green, white, and I just kind of keep my eye open. If I first pick, Huntmaster or the, Tarmogoyf Ooze that makes another Tarmogoyf every turn.
That card's great, yeah.
Yeah, Consuming Ooze or what have you. And then my second pack has an organ hoarder. Well, there we go. I guess we're green, blue. Mm-hmm. It can be as easy as that. The key commons, obviously, organ hoarder and eccentric farmer. Baithook Angler has been my number one disturb creature. It's just 2 mana. I mean, at common, 2 mana, 2/1, and you flash it back as a 1/2 flyer. Just exactly what this deck wants. Picking up those Baithook Anglers is just amazing. I think that having 3 or 4 of these in your deck is one of the things that makes this deck really good, because you're so frequently getting a free card out of your eccentric farmer, organ hoarder, or tapping at the window, right? You're so frequently just going to end up, all right, I cast my thing and then I get a free 1/2 flyer out of the deal, and a 1/2 flyer is no joke. Mm-hmm. So Shadow Beast Sighting is solid, the 4 mana sorcery that makes a 4/4 flashes back for 7, just a way to grind them out, while a 4 mana 4/4 obviously puts you on the board well enough.
It does. And it tends to be the biggest thing at that point. Like, even if your opponent has werewolves that aren't flipped and stuff, the 4/4 usually is bigger than anything the other decks do. So I really like that card for that reason.
Yeah. Larder Zombie is one that I've actually found does pretty good work here as well. Mm-hmm. Because you end up in a spot where you get to really make use of the cards that go to the graveyard. So by milling yourself, you're actually getting some pretty good value.
Do you mill spells with it very often?
I mean, sometimes, because you'd rather mill a Baithook Angler than draw one.
Right, that's true.
And you'd rather, mill, I think, depending on your mana situation, something like Tapping at the Window, which is another card which is really good in this deck. if you're tight on mana, I'd rather just mill it and just draw something else. If you're not, then you'd rather just draw the tapping at the window. If you have 10 lands in play, it's obviously great to do that.
Okay.
And then Shipwreck Sifters is also awesome in this deck.
Okay.
That's the 1/2 that you draw a card, discard a card, and whenever you discard a Spirit or a Disturb card, it gets +1/+1 counter. This deck just, you're a little lighter on Spirits. Shipwreck Sifters is overall better in blue-white, but still really good here in the decks that have 5 or 6 or more Disturb creatures, because putting a 2-mana 2/3 into play on turn 2 is just so good.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you about another card here that I've been kind of stocking up on in this archetype, which is Bird Admirer.
Yeah, Bird Admirer is solid. This is the 1/4 reach that flips into a 3/5 reach.
Yeah, I just found that it really gums up the board and gives me the time I need to get to these flashback and disturb, because you never feel like you're out of gas with this deck. It's just a question of mana. Like, do I have enough time to actually spend it?
Right, and spending 3 mana on a play that, even unflipped, shuts off almost every blue and white common attacker.
Yeah.
So I like Bird Admirer quite a bit. You almost never flip it because this deck doesn't play at instant speed that often. So every turn you're like casting something, but it still does the trick. And then the other thing to note with this deck, this is the opposite of the spells deck. You want like 17 creatures in this deck.
Yeah.
So anytime you can say like, hey, can my defensive card be a creature instead of a spell? It's better.
And that's because of tapping.
Primarily? It's almost all because of tapping at the window, just because getting to use that card versus not is huge. But there are other reasons, like the Death Bonnet Sprout, the 1-mana 1/1 that flips to a 3/3. And then, something like I've splashed for the Diregraph Rising or whatever, the black-green, make a zombie for half the number of creatures you have in your graveyard.
How was it? I haven't played that card yet.
It was worth splashing. The deck itself didn't end up being great, but it was a blue-green deck splashing that because in a Crawl from the Grave, because I had just tons of self-mill. Okay. And then I had games where I would cast it to make 4 zombies, flash it back, make 4 more, and I just killed them with them.
Okay.
So what you're generally trying to do, almost all the key cards in the common slot are creatures or tapping at the window, because that's kind of where this deck is at. When you look at uncommons, here's where you have a lot of the power. This part of the reason that I like, for example, blue, black, and blue, white more on a consistent basis is they have a really just incredibly solid suite of commons. The blue green deck needs uncommons to work. So I'm in that deck a little bit less. Cards like Death Bonnet Sprout, Root Coil Creeper is just fantastic. That's the blue-green for a 2/2. Taps for a mana of any color, or taps for 2 mana of any color to play spells from your graveyard. Note that Auto Tapper is kind of bad with this card. So if your plan is to like play a spell from your hand and disturb a creature, just manually tap it for 2 to use the mana on the disturb first, so it doesn't end up tapping it to cast your spell and then not being able to disturb, or what have you. Slowgurk the Overslime, the green-blue rare that gets a +1/+1 counter whenever you mill a land is awesome here. Rise of the Ants is very good.
Rise of the Ants is one of my favorites, by the way. That's the stabilizer, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Covetous Castaway, and really any of the disturbed creatures are really good for the deck. You just want as many as you can get, because they're just free cards. That's really what this deck's trying to do is you play your eccentric farmer, or you're tapping at the window, and you just flip over a disturbed creature, you're just up a card, straight up. Plus whatever the effect it has going normally. I did have Ominous Roost be good in one of these decks when I had like 8 or so cards I could play from the graveyard. Plus, it does spot you one on when it comes in. So against a deck with flyers, these flyers can actually be really good. I played it against a Vampire Interloper once, and it felt like I'd won the game. Willow Bite is another interesting one. This is the 1-mana 1/1 rare that whenever a card leaves your graveyard, it gets a +1/+1 counter, and when it dies, you gain life equal to its power. And it's actually going to be actively good in almost every blue-green deck, because whenever something gets exiled, like they Diregraph Horde you, it gets a +1/+1 counter when you cast a Disturb or Flashback card, etc. And then Winterthorn Blessing is just A+ in this deck.
It's awesome.
Like, just getting the tempo boost plus the free spell out of your graveyard plus the like interaction when you either, ideally you're attacking them. That's what makes this the best. But even when you're trying to stay alive and stabilize, it can still also help there too. So I really like the Winterthorn Blessing.
And the turn where you cast and flash it back in the same turn is devastating. I mean, it completely changes whatever they thought the game was going, wherever they thought the game was going. When you cast and flash back this thing, your board's bigger, their board's decimated, and you can often force chumps and stuff like that. It's really, really nasty.
I had a game actually with that 7-0 blue-green deck I sent you guys earlier. That's just one of the best decks I've drafted in
That
this
deck was
format.
absurd.
Well, it was a good
Grave
blue
Titan
deck
for starters.
with Tovolar's Huntmaster, Briarbridge Tracker, and Renin 7 plus 3 Root Coil Creepers. But I won a game where they grafted Identity, stole my Tovolar's Huntmaster because I cast Winterthorn Blessing, flashed it back, Root Coil Creepered it, and did that 2 more times. Like I cast it the whole thing total of 3 times, and and then flashed it back 3 times, and that was just so much that I was able to overwhelm them. So
that's awesome.
A real big key with this deck is the creature count. Like when we look at the card type breakdown, 16 or 17 lands, but I'm way more often 17 because you're in a spot where once you get your lands going, you never run out of stuff to do. So I'm less likely to want to skimp. Whereas like in spells decks with considers or zombie decks that just don't have their curve ends at like 3 or 4, I want to play 16 lands. In this deck, you almost always have 2 to 3 cards in your hand plus 2 to 3 cards you could cast from your graveyard. Missing a land drop is way worse here. So most often 17, 16 plus creatures.
Okay, I did want to ask, are you playing ramp spells?
So I have not found that Path to the Festival is very good in this deck. It actually doesn't. This deck's not a high-end ramp deck. You're
not splashing with the deck very often?
You can. It's not terrible to splash, especially since this deck kind of likes Evolving Wilds with Eccentric Farmer anyway to make sure you guarantee get a land back. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, I haven't splashed in this format, though this deck is better at it than normal because of Root Coil Creeper, Evolving Wilds, Path to the Festival if you want to. Though I've been
the 2/4 if you want. Yeah.
The 2/4 is fine. That gains you 3 and taps for any color.
Yeah.
You want like 2 to 4 like flashback spells, so like Shadow Beast Sighting or Tapping at the Window sort of thing, and then you ideally have 2 to 4 interaction spells. One of this deck's weaknesses is interaction.
Yeah.
Just blue and green don't have the best, and the Display of Dominance, the common fight spell, I don't think is very good because this deck also doesn't have insane stats or anything. Mm-hmm. So anytime you can pick up like a Clear Shot or a Silver Bolt or Revenge of the Drowned, it can be very effective for this. Just the difference between drawing 1 removal spell and 0 is pretty big because often if you can remove their 1 really good creature, you're in okay shape. Sometimes just being able to remove none of them is not going to work out.
Okay. So
for cards you should be valuing higher or lower, obviously like the flashback spells and disturb creatures all go up. That's what this deck's trying to do. Scab Wrangler is one where this is the second best Scab Wrangler deck after Black Blue, just because of how many creatures this puts into play. And you just sit there, and often what you'll do is you'll use it to keep that 1 flyer from killing you or their 1/5/5 from killing you. And then you have a turn or two where you go like tap, untap, attack with a bunch of stuff. And you can end up kind of turning the corner with Scab Wrangler, Silver Bolt for the reason I mentioned. And then here, this is the deck that actually uses the board stall cards the best. So cards like the Triskaidekaphile, Mysterious Tome. Actually, one I really love in this deck, Storm the Festival, the big collected company, because this deck has tons of permanents. So it almost always hits like 2 good things, or at least 1 good thing plus 1 medium thing. It self-mills, and flashing it back is definitely doable when you're casting all these spells that draw you extra cards and you're not your land drops.
I like this.
This is the Storm the Festival deck. So I like blue-green. It's, again, like blue-red, it doesn't come together quite as often because you need some good uncommons, but it can be really good when you get it going.
Mm-hmm. So, again, where do we rank the deck, roughly speaking? It's tier 2, right? But it's in that tier 2 pretty solidly.
I have this higher than blue-red. I have this I basically, the tier 1 decks I have are blue, black, and blue, white. Those are the only tier 1 decks in my opinion.
Same.
And then I would put like white, green, white, black, blue, green in like the next tier, with blue, red like a smidge below, like blue, red, and blue, black. And then, blue, red, and red, black. Mm-hmm. And then red, green, black, green, and red, white are decks I just really tried not to draft.
And where do you have white, black?
I have white, black in the second tier alongside.
That's where I have it too. Okay.
Yeah, alongside white, green, which I've liked, and blue, green.
Okay, well, that leaves one more for us to cover here, which is one of the tier 1 archetypes that you just mentioned, and it's the blue-white deck. So this is how would you describe it? A disturb flyers deck? I don't know exactly the best way to describe it.
I think the best way to think of this deck is just classic blue-white flyers. Mm-hmm. It just happens to use the disturb mechanic to give it like that extra push across the finish line. Mm-hmm. And so it does have, you're going to see it, like synergy stuff in this, like we're going to talk about Shipwreck Sifters and, Faithful Mending and stuff like that. But at its core, this is a blue-white tempo flyers deck. Like you are trying to like play small flyers, attack them, use bounce spells, and just, beat them down before they can do anything about it.
Okay. And how do you get into the deck?
So This deck plays more white cards than it does blue cards.
Mm-hmm.
So the main way I end up in this deck is if just early white card, like good aggressive white creatures are open. So, cards like Candlegrove Witch or Lunarch Veteran, or a good white uncommon. I really like drafting blue in this format. Yeah, shocker, I know, but blue's really good. I don't need an excuse to be in blue.
Mm-hmm.
That's just not something that's a problem. So I think that it's pretty easy to end up. If you start with the dream in this format is to start with a bunch of blue cards because you can go into every blue deck is good.
That's right. You start with Organ Hoarder and you work your way from there.
Yeah, I mean that's just this format in a nutshell, right?
It is.
So the way I end up in blue-white specifically the most often is when I start with white cards and then I see a Baithook Angler fourth pick because Baithook Angler is fantastic in this deck, or Shipwreck Sifters. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about some of the key commons. I think the best common for this deck is Shipwreck Sifters because it's a 2-mana 2/3 that lets you usually draw a card. Like, yes, you're discarding a card, but you're kind of discarding half a card. You're not really even discarding a whole card. And then Lunarch Veteran is great. Baithook Angler is great. Candlegrove Witch is very good. Just 2-mana 2/2 flyers, exactly what this deck wants. It uses Falcon Abomination quite well. Gale Drifter, and of course Organ Hoarder is great in this deck, but it's not it's not the sort of thing that you need to really worry yourself about too much.
Where are you at on Gavany Silversmith in the deck? The one that puts the 2+1/+1 counters on?
I think it's okay.
I've liked it for the tempo hit of counters on flyers and leave back a blocker, right? It makes it hard for them to kill you the next turn, and you're getting in quite a bit of damage.
Yeah, I have yet to cut it from my deck.
Okay.
But it's not a card I tend to prioritize super highly because, it's good, but it's not...
Still 4 mana, yeah.
There's just lots of 4-mana plays, and it's great at putting a counter on a 1/1 flyer, but putting a counter on like a Baithook Angler is usually not that impressive.
Yeah. One of the ways to envision these type of cards is imagine the +1/+1 counter getting the abilities of the thing that it goes on. And obviously those +1/+1 counters would be better, right? If you put one on 2 different flyers, right? Now all of a sudden you're getting a lot better than just +1/+1 counters on some ground creatures that can't get through anyway. So. What about uncommons and stuff? Or did you get through all the commons? Sorry.
Yeah, we talked about all the commons.
Okay.
It is worth noting that Revenge of the Drowned and Flip the Switch, while you're not using the zombies quite as well as in blue-black, are still very good. So,
yeah, I have found myself doing that with the what's the spirit? Storm Spirit, the 3/3 flyer for 5. And, because, again, more flyers in this deck is fine, and then any of those instant speed stuff that you can leave up in lieu of it tend to do well.
Yeah. I think that being able to utilize your mana instant speed is pretty nice. But for uncommons and rares, all the Disturb cards at uncommon are fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Your Chaplain Evolved, Overwhelmed Archivist, the Graph Keeper, like you really can't go wrong with any of those. Mm-hmm. And then Nebelgast Intruder might be the best uncommon. I don't know.
Card's awesome.
It's just an unbelievably good card. And then Dual Craft Trainer is very good here. That's the 4-mana 3/3 that if you have a Coven, it gives double strike. Just playing it to give one of your 2/2 flyers double strike, and then having just a real beefer on the ground is really where you want to be.
Yeah, 3/3 first strike's tough to tack into for all 2 3-mana creatures and some 4s. And if you're increasing your clock in the sky while doing it, that's awesome.
Yeah. Loyal Griff is very good. The Flash Windrake that can bounce a creature. And then Faithful Mending. This is good in the deck. I did want to call it out because I get them cast against me often enough that I feel like people are like, ooh, 3rd pick Faithful Mending, I should be blue-white. Mm-hmm. It's not that good in the deck. It's just okay. You want to spend your first 5 turns playing creatures, so you really don't want like a bunch of like Faithful Mending type cards in your deck. And again, it's fine, but it's just not a card that I'm going to spend tons of time wanting to cast early. And if you don't end up discarding Disturb creatures, like it takes work to actually get cards out of it. Like if you play it and discard 1 Disturb creature, you broke even on cards. That's not amazing.
And it's a lot of mana too. Yeah. What about the card types?
So here you want 16 or 17 lands. Like you can be 16, but again, this deck has a lot of stuff going on in the late game that you don't need to be 17. And if you have a bunch of Shipwreck Sifters, like you're not going to get too punished by drawing extra lands. So you want to make sure not to spend too much time doing that. Mm-hmm. And then you want a lot of creatures, 14 to 16 creatures, a couple of combat tricks. You can end up, using combat tricks. All right. The creatures are kind of small, so they're not like the best thing in the world, but you are going to be able to get some good, decent value from them if you can turn a combat with them fairly well. Like I really do like the 1 mana trick that gives your creature +2/+0 and lifelink, Blessed Defiance.
Mm-hmm.
Because think of it as like a 1 mana 1/1 flyer that gains you 4 life. Like that's a pretty good card, and it can help you win a combat too. So, and then Flare of Faith is okay too. The 2 mana one that
humans,
because you end up with humans in your deck a pretty good amount of the time. Yeah. So,
okay.
And then you want a couple removal and bounce spells. You want like 3 or so. You don't want to go overboard. This isn't a control deck. You need enough creatures to kill them. But if you can end up doing that, then you'll end up being pretty happy that you have the key revenge or borrowed time, banishing light or what have you.
Yeah, one of the things that I've noticed about that you don't really need card draw spells straight up, right? Because a lot of it's tacked onto the creatures, either in the form of disturb, like you talked about, but there's also just Organ Hoarder. Like is a card advantage card in and of itself. And same with the, what is the stupid card called? The 2/2 that draws you a card when it ETBs. I can't remember the name for some reason.
Oh, Search Party Captain.
Yeah, Search Party Captain, right? Like these type of cards actually do keep the cards flowing into hand for you. And then in conjunction with Disturb, it's rare that you need to just play a spell that's, Vivisection or something like that doesn't fit in these decks.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I would caution you not to play that unless like something really like you really were lacking. It's just you don't want to spend your time doing that.
No, but it seems like you would, right? Because you're like, I've got all these disturbed creatures. I'll Vivisection one away. I'll get all my value, but that's not really the optimal build for these.
Yeah, and the way you want to play with this deck is for tempo, and this is why Lunarch Veteran can be so effective in the deck. Is it's a 1 mana play that can maybe hit for 1 or whatever. But mainly it gains you like 3 to 5 life, making racing harder, and then at some point comes back as a 1/1 flyer, and the deck utilizes both halves pretty nicely. Mm-hmm. Getting a nice chump in with Lunarch Veteran is pretty good. Overall, I think that this deck is consistently very good, and it can pressure the blue-black decks well enough that they're going to have a real hard time getting use of all their cards. And decay tokens are quite bad, right, when you're behind. So
yep, they're also quite bad when your opponent has a big life total buffer where you can't use them to finish off the game. I think that's why this deck actually stands out the most is because of its matchup against blue-black. I think it's probably right up there in the top 2 or 3, just like raw power when it comes together. It is a lot harder to put together a great version of this deck than it is blue-black because the white commons don't go quite as deep as the black. But it does kind of beat the crap out of the blue-black deck, and that really does make it stand out because basically every matchup, when I have a good blue-black deck, I feel that I have answers. I'm favored. I have a route to victory. There's no one card, that type of thing. This is the one deck that I really don't want to see on the other side. Like when they lead off with a Lunarch Veteran, it's like, okay, this is going to be hard. Like, I got my work cut out for me. And that to me, actually does bump it up a little bit frankly, just because I've been playing on the ladder and you see so much blue-black on there. Yeah.
And it's resilient to removal because of Lunarch Veteran. It does a pretty good job racing. Like it really has everything that you're looking for out of a deck.
Mm-hmm. It's sweet. Yeah. I'm a big fan of this deck. I wonder if low key, this is like, if you could just get a good version, say a solid B version of any deck, if this is actually the one that you'd want, because of the way that the matchups play out. But yeah, we'll have to see. Luis, before we go, a couple of things to mention. First off, the LR versus LOL showdown's coming up.
Yeah, so that's going to be this Sunday at noon Pacific. We'll all be streaming it, as per the norm, and it'll be a lot of fun. We're up 3-2 right now, so we'll see what ends up happening. But I enjoy these. It's like the sort of thing where if they're not going to give us high stake limited tournaments, we'll create our own. And
our own, yeah.
This is what we got these days, and I'm very happy to get to play these.
It's our very own high stakes, low stakes limited tournament, and we made it ourselves.
I'll have you know that BK did a draft. So
he did. So he's well prepared.
he's increased his normal preparation by quite a bit.
It's so brutal because I will have done 100 something drafts and he's going to do better than me, and it's just like so depressing. The other thing to bring up is that the World Championships are coming up not this weekend but next, and there is actually booster draft for it. So I know that this past year and a half or so has been very constructed heavy with having to move to arena because of the pandemic and stuff. But
I'm real excited for that.
I'm sorry, Luis. But I know our listeners would want to know because I know a lot of people didn't realize it. That there's
I am
actually
glad
draft.
they're doing it.
Yeah,
and it is going to be cool seeing people get to draft.
Yeah, so it's 3 out of 10 of the Swiss rounds are booster draft in Midnight Hunt. So if you want to see the 16 players playing in that tournament, that'll start on the 8th. And I'll be doing coverage for the draft for that too, so I'm stoked for it. Okay, let's call it a show there, Luis. Great stuff. We've really covered blue. We've got the blue corner just covered now, which is kind of our MO, but it also is very relevant for this format. We'll be covering others too.
Jamming on this format. I know you have too.
I love it.
I really like trying to do our best to give the listeners some really good actionable advice, because this is a cool format, a lot of gameplay. And if you're struggling in this format, I would say that focusing on gameplay is probably a good place to start, because the games are tough in this format. There's a lot going on.
There's so many little things to miss, as my chat lets me know every time I stream. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. Pretty much everywhere. You can find everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com. I want to thank our sponsors, Channel Fireball. Check out their new marketplace, just launched as of today, and you can go over there and see how it looks and maybe pick up some singles while you're there. If you pick up anything, make sure you use the affiliate code LR at checkout. I do appreciate it. And then the show's also brought to you by FTX. If you're interested in cryptocurrencies or NFTs or any of the kind of digital assets that are starting to emerge in the world now, check out FTX, ftx.us in the United States and ftx.com outside of it. And you can learn about it. And if you feel ready, you can even invest in some of it. I want to remind you that we're not investment professionals, so make sure that you consult one if you are looking to do investing of any kind. With that, I want to say thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.
So one of the topics that comes up a lot when I stream is like, oh, how good is this draft format? Is it the best, one of the best of all time? Is this an all-timer? What's your top 5 draft formats?
People ask you that a lot, yeah.
And I've talked about on the show a lot how, what my top 5 are. It tends to be like a rotating cast involving some combination of like, Ravnica, Dominaria, Invasion, Khans, Innistrad, whatever, like some amalgam of those. Mm-hmm. And it makes me think, what are the keys to an all-time great limited format? Mm-hmm. Like, what are we looking for? Number 1, or maybe number 0, like kind of like prefacing here, is a lot of the formats that we would trot out as being among the greatest of all time are driven by nostalgia. And I think it's important to kind of get that out of the way, because when you look at some of the older formats, if they were released now and people didn't know they were released before, like if you released Invasion now, people would be like, the mana fixing's terrible. Yeah. Wow, all the spells are so good, but the creatures are awful. Like, because Invasion was a format where you got to put cards like Factor Fiction and Probe and Repulse and Agonizing Demise, Magma Burst in your deck. If you don't know what some of these cards are, they're just absurd 2-for-1s, incredible spells. And meanwhile, 5 mana 3/3 and 4 mana 2/2 flyer was like completely playable, because this is back when in Magic Design they were scared to make creatures good and loved making spells good. So it was something that it took them a while. They've gotten past that, but
now they flipped.
There are commons in formats now that we don't play, like Famished Foragers, right? 4 mana 4/3 with 2 abilities. Mm-hmm. One of adding mana if you hit them, one of the loot ability. It used to be that 2 red for a 4/3 was just a really good rate common.
Yeah. Totally like playable.
Good rate. And going even further back, 5 mana 4/4 with like a minor ability, not flying, like a minor ability was like, ooh, that's a good uncommon. So
yeah, things done change. There's no doubt about it.
If you release some of the formats people trot out as the best, I think they would get hammered nowadays. They've earned their place. There is something to be said. Invasion was the first gold set. It was a really groundbreaking set and had tons of cool, awesome, really fun designs. So it deserves to be talked about. But if you released it now, it would not get nearly as good of reviews. So the components for a good draft format. I think good gameplay is a really big part of it, and these aren't really in order, but like good gameplay, this is what we're seeing in Innistrad, like Midnight Hunt here. If you were to tell me, absent other information, is it good that multiple of the color pairs are quite bad, and two of the colors are much stronger than the other colors?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I would say that's not preferable. But it turns out gameplay really it does make a big difference. I think having powerful synergies is really important because they make it so the cards are more than just the sum of their parts. And you want your deck to not just be how many good cards did you get, how many bad cards do you have, or how many filler cards do you have. You want your deck to be like, oh, well, I have this card, which is really good in my deck because, or I did this and it made it so this deck's plan really works. I get to put Eccentric Farmer in my deck to back up my Disturb cards. Oh, Delver of Secrets works here, or Seize the Storms. Scab Wrangler is a bomb in blue-black and like pretty mediocre in blue-red. Like you put it in your deck, but it's really not anything. And this is something like AFR, for example, which we just played through. Really, really, that's where it was lacking. AFR had mediocre gameplay and mediocre synergies, and that made it fall, I think, pretty flat. You also want cool cards. I mean, this sounds kind of dumb, but like cool cards that people really like, and cool, and that doesn't just mean gameplay. It doesn't just mean power level. It also just means setting, art, all that. And I know that's more subjective, but all of this is to a degree. Yeah. And having cards that people really gravitate towards in our suite really does go a long way. And then having lots of different archetypes to draft. And this is somewhere where Innistrad isn't very high on the list, though. I mean, if you look at the tier 1+2 archetypes, that's 7 out of 10 decks, right? That's not bad.
That's about average, right? It's 7 or 8.
Yeah, I would say so. And this is why sets like Strixhaven or Ravnica, like guild sets, tend to have a challenge right out the gates. There's 5 decks in those formats. And if you miss on one of them and there's 4 decks, or miss on 2 of them and there's 3 decks, kind of a disaster in terms of longevity. So I think that's the biggest complaint you could levy against Strixhaven. Lorehold was really bad.
Yep.
And Witherbloom was not that much better. Mm-hmm. So you had a 3 guild format. Mm-hmm. And that meant that when you had a draft, you were most often one of those 3 decks. How many times are you going to draft? Well, it turns out actually we drafted a lot of it because, again, the gameplay was good.
The gameplay is good, and I could just draft Teamer every time.
Yes, you could. But, when you look at it and there's only a couple decks to draft, well, your attention's going to wander too. So when I look at all-time draft formats, I'm talking formats I actively want to draft the 51st time is about the rank. I've far surpassed that on Innistrad. A lot of the formats I've mentioned, I've drafted many, many times, like over 100 times, and really continue to enjoy it. Because here's the thing. Magic's awesome and draft is awesome. The first 5 drafts of every format are pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure.
It's really hard to miss on that. So I think that format diversity, synergy, and gameplay, plus like the coolness factor, are what I look for in the formats that score highly on those tend to kind of eke their way into the all-time draft format. So hopefully that gives you an idea of why I rank things, though again, I don't really have a firm ranking because it just kind of depends on what I'm feeling at the moment.